Welcome back to Even Tacos Fall Apart, the podcast where we dive deep into the real, gritty, and often messy aspects of mental health. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today we're going to be talking about trauma, grief, and how we can pivot in our lives after experiencing these intense challenges. Trauma and grief are experiences that unfortunately touch us all at some point. They can shake us to our core and leave us feeling lost, overwhelmed, and alone. But here's the truth. You are not alone, and it's still okay to feel what you're feeling. In this episode, we're going to break down these heavy topics and explore practical ways to navigate through them. Today's guest is Tamara Fox, someone who knows firsthand what it means to face trauma and grief head-on. She shares her journey with us, highlighting the power of taking control of your healing process, and emphasizes that trauma doesn't have to define or control your life. Healing is an ongoing process that demands time, effort, and a whole lot of self-compassion. Tamara's insights are a reminder that resilience is less about bouncing back and more about how we respond to and grow from the challenges we face. We'll talk about the importance of finding methods that work for you, whether that's therapy, medication, or creating a sense of safety and security in your life. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, and Tamara's story reinforces the idea that everyone's healing journey is unique. Small steps and achievable goals can lead to sustainable change and increased resilience. It's about choosing how to respond to your situation, processing your emotions, and allowing yourself to grow through it. Grief is also something we all encounter, often in ways we never expected. Losing someone you love is incredibly painful, and learning to live without them physically present can feel impossible at times. Tamara shares her perspective on processing grief, finding peace with the loss, and continuing to live your life with their memory. She also talks about the comfort some find in seeing a medium and connecting with loved ones who have passed, and how alternative healing methods can complement traditional therapy. In our conversation, she also dives into the role of coaching and the healing process. Coaching is not about looking back, as therapy often is. It's about focusing on future goals and tapping into your internal strengths. It's about holding yourself accountable and reframing negative self-talk, the kind that we're all too familiar with. We also touch on the importance of self-care, things like nutrition, exercise, other supportive practices like acupuncture and energy work. And Tamara reminds us that making small, sustainable lifestyle changes is far more effective than drastic, unsustainable ones. Before we dive into the interview, I want to encourage you to really engage with this episode. Think about your own experiences and how these insights might resonate with you. Share your thoughts with our community, whether that's on social media or in the comments or even just talking to a friend. Your voice is what matters, and connecting with others can be a powerful part of your healing journey. So grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, find a comfortable spot, and join us as we explore trauma, grief, and the power of pivoting with Tamara Fox. This conversation is raw, real, and packed with practical advice and personal stories that I hope will resonate deeply with you. Let's get started. Hello, welcome to another Mental Health Monday. I'm really excited for our topic tonight. It's going to be great. Bye, Mark. I see you. Thank you for being here. Going to be slow on typing because I'm on mobile, but quick enough to get here first. Absolutely. Yes. Well, welcome. Thank you guys for being here. If you have not been here before, I'll give a little explanation of how these Mental Health Mondays go. So you are welcome to ask questions if they are generally on topic. We always get sidetracked, but generally on topic. And our topic tonight is trauma, grief, and pivoting. So I am joined by Tamara Fox, and I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be great. I had some technical issues with my camera earlier, so I'm hoping that everything stays the way that it's supposed to. But y'all know that, my streams are my streams. So if you have any questions, oh shit, I did not open the queue. I'm going to talk about this fast and type about it slow. If you have any questions for our guest and you want to enter them into the question queue and you're here on Twitch with us, make sure you type in !Q, follow that with your question. That'll put it into the question queue, and Bite Mark is going to demonstrate that for us right now. And while she is doing that, if you're on YouTube, you can just put your question straight into the chat. We'll make sure to get to it. So, Tamara, thank you so much for joining us today and just taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So a little bit about Tamara. Tamara is a health and wellness coach who partners with her clients to transform their lives. She became a coach after overcoming her own experiences with trauma, healing, and health challenges. She takes her own experiences, empathy, education, and resources to empower her clients to be who they want to be, regardless of their past experiences, which is a goal that I absolutely love. Growing up, her father was struggling with a severe opioid addiction and was verbally abusive during blackouts. He also battled with severe mental health issues from the drug use for years as well. And in 2011, at 19 years old, Tamara woke up in the middle of the night in her apartment to a masked man standing over her bed with a gun who robbed her and raped her. Having survived that experience, Tamara struggled with severe anxiety, PTSD, and depression, and started with traditional Western medicine to help her heal in combination with talk therapy, EMDR, and more. After years of healing, she shifted to a more holistic and Eastern medicine approach and is grateful that today she's in a place where she can manage her health through a holistic and Eastern medicine approach, free from prescriptions. In addition to all of that, as if that was not enough, she lost 7 loved ones in 6 years, including her father, her dog that she got for protection after that incident in 2011, her brother, and one of her best friends. Even with all these traumatic experiences, Tamara has persevered, found happiness, love, and a fulfilled life. She fosters a supportive and empowering environment, allowing her clients to define their goals, tap into their internal strengths, and utilize external resources to make sustainable and healthy lifestyle behavior changes. So I've got a couple of socials, website and LinkedIn in particular. Was there anywhere else that you want to throw out there?
No, I joke I'm the worst millennial ever because I just use LinkedIn and my website. So I'm not a big fan of social media. But yeah, LinkedIn and my website are the best ways to stay in contact.
Perfect. Hey, you know what? You are where you are, and that's okay. All right, so Bite Mark, as I mentioned, has a question in the question queue, and she would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
Ooh, I feel like that I can't answer that because I don't even know the names of any poems. Okay, so correction. I do have an Instagram. It's personal. It's not for my business.
That's totally fine.
I follow some of the poets on Instagram, but I don't know any of their names off the top of my head. So I apologize. I can't even answer that question.
Do you have a favorite song or something like that? Songs are generally poems as well.
Not song, no.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm already disappointing.
No, that's okay. Okay, now other answers that I know that Bite Mark will accept. What about a favorite book?
Yes, Mindset by Carol Dweck. It's actually on the shelf behind me.
Oh, nice.
It's my current favorite book. I think I change favorite books with seasons, but the reason it's my current favorite book is because it ties into everything I talk about, I speak to, because we have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. You can only have one. And a growth mindset, essentially, we enjoy change. We enjoy learning new things. We know that one way of doing things isn't the only way of doing things. We're energized by change. And I found that ties so much into resilience and healing and all of the other things I've experienced, which is why I'm a big fan of that book. And it applies not just to professional, but it applies to how you parent your children, your relationships, whether romantic or friendships, family, everything. So it's a really well-rounded book versus just something you can apply in one lens.
That's awesome. I love that. I just added it to my Goodreads and posted a link in the chat as well. So if anyone wants to read that or buy it or whatever, go buy it wherever you want. But the link is to Goodreads. So I don't think you can buy anything on Goodreads, but y'all buy it wherever you want. So what do you enjoy doing when you're not busy with your life coaching or with your coaching business?
In my free time, I really like to, well, first off, just anything active and working out. That's been a huge part of my life, not only from a healing perspective, but just a day-to-day perspective. I also love arts and crafts. Love them. My friends and I just the other week did a silversmithing course where we went and made our own smithing jewelry. We made rings. It was really fun.
Oh, that is so cool.
was really cool. I've also done like I do a lot of paint your own pottery. We did my friends and I the other month too also did. We threw pottery on like the wheel, which was really fun to learn. So anything my boyfriend's mom also over Christmas got me into embroidery. So now I embroider, which is really cool to learn. So anything like arts and crafts, especially if it involves paint of any sort or jewelry of any sort, I'm all in.
That's awesome. You sound like my oldest. My 17-year-old is just like anything arts and craft. His current thing is jewelry making. He loves to paint. He loves to do like all of it. He did a lot of clay stuff fairly recently, and it's just anything he can get his hands on to kind of do. That's how he is. And I was that way as well. I don't know why I don't anymore. I guess just lack of time, probably. Do you have a favorite life hack as well?
Define life hack.
So a life hack could be anything that makes your life easier that is not necessarily something that you would think of on a normal day-to-day basis. My favorite one to give the example of is if you're not in the mood to make a sandwich, just go eat the components of a sandwich out of your fridge. Like you don't have to actually go through the motions of doing all of that. But it can be anything, like a great phone app to help you stay organized or anything like anything really.
Yeah. I think my favorite one would be the night before I prepare everything I need for the next morning because I feel often so much we wake up in the morning and things happen whether we expect them or not. I know I told you earlier today my computer completely wouldn't turn on. So that was but like I fill up my water bottle for the gym. I fill up the teapot so I can make tea in the morning. I get everything, all my morning supplements prepared. Like I have everything ready to go. So when I'm up in the morning after I do like a meditation and eat breakfast, I have everything I need instead of having to spend that extra 30, however many minutes, things organized for the day. And I can just kind of hop into work or whatever I need to do.
I love that. And we were talking before about, you're kind of a morning person. I'm kind of a night person. I feel like if I took some of my night energy and did something like that, organized myself for the next day, maybe I wouldn't quite hate mornings so much. Although it really is like, I only hate them until I have coffee. So I don't know that would really help it.
You could even like program your coffee pot to go off at a certain time and fill it with water and fill it with coffee grounds. So then it's just ready to go when you wake up. But I've also found too, like on days, because I usually wake up at 5 a.m. without an alarm, no problem. But there are days that sometimes I don't. So on those days that I do want to sleep in an extra 10, 15 minutes, it doesn't completely destroy my morning because I've prepared what I needed to the night before.
See, now you're reminding me of my youngest, who also wakes up between 4 and 5 without an alarm clock, just naturally. And I'm like, I don't know who you are.
Circadian rhythm.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy because my 17-year-old and I are the same. Like we're nighttime. All of our energy hits at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's our stride, and it carries us on through. And then my 10-year-old is just, he wakes up so stinking early, but he also goes to bed at like 8 o'clock every night. So
relate.
Yep. All right. So we talked about your favorite book. Do you have a favorite movie that you feel like more people should give the time of day?
Favorite movie right now? Oof. One doesn't come to mind. For the longest time, it was Finding Nemo. I know that's really silly, but
I love that movie.
Yeah, and I feel like a good movie that I saw somewhat recently is the Elements movie from Pixar. I love Pixar movies.
I cry so hard at that movie.
I did like that movie. As far as like new movies out, that is the latest new movie that I've really enjoyed. I'm trying to think. There was another one I really liked, but it's not coming to mind.
That one was such a good one. And I mean, to be fair, I cry all the time. So that's not anything unusual, I guess. Here's a link to that movie if anyone's wondering what movie we're talking about. But it's such a good one. And I feel like it was a movie that I hadn't seen a representation of that in a cartoon movie that way. And so I really appreciated that about it. It was just so good and touching.
I liked it. It was fun.
Yeah. And it showed one of the characters who cries all the time. And I'm like, it's me. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about trauma and grief and pivoting. And, you've overcome a lot of trauma in your life, and I hit kind of a couple of them in your bio, and that kind of started in childhood and continued as a young adult. So can you talk about how you decided to be intentional when it comes to your healing journey, and kind of what would you say the key factors were in your recovery, in your healing?
Sure. It was a variety of things, and I think it's that way for many people when healing, because it's constant. And I tell anyone this whenever they're experiencing grief or trauma or anything that's impacting them from a mental health perspective, is it's a lot of it's trial and error, because we're all different. How we respond to different modalities, treatment modalities is different, and what we truly need is different. So what I found for me, kind of that moment of why I wanted to propel that forward, was I didn't like how I felt. Like, I didn't like feeling like crap. I also encountered people who would trauma dump, for lack of better words, on people. They had so much unhealed trauma at the surface, and it was just like word vomit would come out of them to people who weren't their therapist, or who weren't right. It wasn't the right place. And I saw that, and I just reflected back in myself. I don't want to be that person. I don't want other people to, one, feel uncomfortable because I'm not using the right venue for this conversation, or I'm not coming from a place that it's an appropriate time to share that conversation. I feel when I approach my trauma and my situations now, I can say it in a way that majority of the time, not all the time, it doesn't make people uncomfortable because I healed it. And I also just didn't like feeling bad. The third, I think one of the biggest components of it all, and you alluded to this with my dad's addiction, is I didn't want to end up like my dad. My dad also struggled from some mental health issues when he was younger, and when he became addicted to opioids, that only perpetuated and became much worse and caused him to spiral. And I saw what my options were. I saw that, I have his genetics. I could end up like my dad and choose not to take care of myself and choose not to heal my trauma, or I could be who I wanted to be regardless of what had happened to me.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about trauma dumping, because I think in a lot of cases, it has to come out somewhere, sometime, right? Even if you're really trying to keep everything super close and you're trying to not let things come out, it's going to come out in either actions or it's going to come out in words. And I feel like, to a point, you almost don't have control over it unless you take control over it. I mean, is that something that you found with yourself as well?
Yeah, I mean, we are the drivers of our own life. Like, we are the only person we can control. It's funny. I was actually having this conversation with a friend the other day, just about life and future and outcomes. And I remember saying to her, I was like, you as in her, and I as in me, I'm the only person I can control. I can't control what anyone else will do. I can't control how anyone else will react, and I can't control how anyone else will feel. But I can control how I feel. I can control to heal myself. I can control to feel better. And I can let go of the outcomes of everything else, which is something I utilize a lot with, because I feel, especially for people who have experienced trauma, we are very future focused because we lacked control at one point in our lives, or for me, like 10 points in my life. And as a result, I want to control everything that happens to me because I want nothing bad to ever happen to me again. And so then we stay very future focused, we're very control oriented, and we don't stay present. And it took me years and a lot of work, and I'm still not perfect at it to this day. I still sometimes focus on the future when I shouldn't, and I still try to control things I shouldn't. I'm getting much better, and I'm a work in progress just like everyone else. But that was a big thing that I learned too, is that didn't help me. I was creating more anxiety for myself by trying to control the future of what was happening instead of staying present in where we're at today. So, and I think it's a really, really hard lesson for anyone who's experienced trauma, especially when you feel like you controlling something is the only thing you have. Because you're like, well, what's going to happen if I don't control it? It's like, well, it's going to turn out how it's going to turn out no matter what you do. So if you let go and relax, you'll feel better in the process than trying to control it to get there.
Yeah. Which I know many times people say things like this, and it's like, yes, okay, that is better. it's hard to get to that point though. Like I am the kind of person who loves all the control as well. So I fully understand like it is difficult. It's difficult to get there and to say like, okay, I'm going to be in this present moment instead of worrying about all these things that are going to happen whether I do something about them or not. It's really hard. It's really hard to do. So, good job continuing to work on yourself and everything because that's not easy.
No, it totally depends on where somebody's at in the healing process. I mean, I can't remember if I gave you dates prior, but one of my brothers and one of my best friends were both killed in 2022. So
Mm,
it'll be 2 years in March for my brother, and then 2 years in August for one of my best friends. So
mm,
5 months apart. So 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago. And shortly after one and both of those deaths, I constantly thought everybody was going to die. So it depends where you're at in your healing process and your timeline. So for those who are, I also want to caution it with like, if you have anyone in your listeners listening who just recently went through something or are still processing through it at a much deeper level, they may still be in that place where they're trying to control, and that's normal. I also don't
mhm.
want anyone to feel like they shouldn't feel that way because I felt that way, 2 years ago. I
Yeah.
felt that I had to make sure, like with my dogs, for example, I would find one little minor thing and I was like, I have to make sure they don't die. Like I was trying to control everything to make sure they didn't die. Or something would pop up with me and it's like, I have to make sure I'm okay. Or my mom wouldn't answer her phone and I call her again because I wanted to make sure she didn't die because I had just experienced death.
Yeah.
So again, for anyone listening, I say that with it took work to get here, as you acknowledge, it took a lot of time, a lot of healing, and a lot of effort. But if you're not at that place yet, it's okay. And
Mhm.
I've been there more times than I can count, and you can process through it and get to that other side.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
appreciate you phrasing it that way for sure. 'Cause that's important. That is important to let people know that like wherever you are in this, it's okay and it's valid.
Yeah. I just have people come to me. I mean, family, friends, clients, people that hear me on podcasts, see me at speaking events, find me on LinkedIn, whatever it may be. And they'll say, you handle the way you talk about things comes through so gracefully. And you
Mhm.
say it with such confidence and you are so clear when you say, and I just don't know how you're so strong. I don't know how you do that. And my response to them is, I had to do the work to do that. It took me time to do this. If I recorded podcasts 6 years ago, my voice would be much more crackly. I
Mhm.
probably would have a lot more tears. I would be in a different place with my processing. So it's hard because I think sometimes people see, especially in the mental health space, especially in the healing space, they see these people on either podcasts or videos or read them in books and they just seem like they have everything together.
Yeah.
And while yes, they may have a lot together now, they didn't. And it's so hard. They're like, why am I not like that? I should be there. I want to be there. I felt that way too. I was listening to these people and I was like, they're just fine. They're totally fine from their healing. It's like, but they weren't at one point.
Yeah.
And I try to always remind any listeners of that when I do the podcast. Like I wasn't okay at one point. If you were to talk
Mhm.
to my loved ones or my close friends in 2019 or 2021 or 2022 even, they would tell you I was a much different person.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's I mean, listen, there have been many moments on this podcast in particular where y'all have heard me cry about something. So it happens. Like you are gonna have emotions and you are gonna experience things, and just because you see someone who's, you know, seemingly got their shit together, like I can tell you I don't have my shit together. I do not I still to this day do not have my shit together. I'm still working on a whole bunch of stuff, and that's okay. It is what it is. But also you kind of got to take it's kind of that social media effect too of you only see what people post, and why would I post myself with tears streaming down my face? Like I'm just not gonna post that. So yeah. Oh, Bite says I definitely assume anyone that doesn't answer the phone is dead. My therapist and I are working on it, which is funny because she called me earlier today and I was like, you must be driving because you almost never call. And I was like, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. Because I have the same thoughts. I'm like, I need to let you know that I can't answer the phone because I'm busy doing something. So yeah, I feel you on that one.
I mean, I still often with folks, if they don't, like my mom usually will text me back or my boyfriend, like they'll be like, hey, I can't talk, or my friends, but most people know to like give me a heads up still. I mean, again, it's been
Yeah.
almost 2 years since my brother and one of my best friends were killed, but it's normal. Like to lose people you love, you feel that that ripple effect is going to happen to everyone else around you. So I get it. I empathize.
Yeah. Now you mentioned your father's kind of struggle with addiction, and I know that had a lasting impact on you, and I'm sure your entire family as well. So how did you navigate the complexities of growing up with someone who was dealing with addiction? How did that impact you, and how did you get through it?
Yeah. So my dad's opioid addiction didn't become really transparent or apparent maybe until I was in college.
Mm,
And kind of backtrack for your listeners to give them a little bit of context. My dad and I had a really rocky relationship my entire life because I found out my parents were getting divorced because I found him on a dating website. Because when I was in middle school, we had one of those older Apple computers that the screen swiveled. They don't make them anymore. And anytime I'd walk into the office, his back would be facing the door and he'd swivel the screen. I was like 12 or 13 years old. I'm smart enough to comprehend that that's suspicious behavior.
mm-hmm.
And I had his email password, so I logged in and found him on a dating website. So after that, I told him I didn't want to talk to him again. Didn't talk to him for 6 months, which is a long time for a 12 or 13-year-old to not talk to
Yeah.
their child or to their father. So we had a relatively rocky relationship from since then because it's traumatizing for a kid to find for about their parents getting divorced. And then, middle school, he traveled also a lot for work, so over 100,000 miles a year. So I never really saw him a lot in general as
Mm-hmm.
a kid. He was always physically present, but never emotionally present. One of the reasons, something I talk about a lot, is emotional intelligence. One of the reasons I am very passionate about it and became a certified coach and trainer is because my dad had little to no emotional intelligence, and I saw how that impacted not only his romantic relationships, but his relationships with his children, his friends, and everyone else around him. So high school, middle school, started college, rocky in and out. That's also somewhat normal for kids that age to have rocky relationships with their
Yeah.
parents. And then in 2011, when I was robbed at gunpoint and raped in my apartment, uh, after that is when I saw my dad start to get worse. And in many ways, he's deceased, so I don't have an answer to this, and we never had this conversation. But in many ways, I do think from some of the things he indirectly told me that what happened to me really triggered him, and the opioid addiction got worse from that as his way to suppress
Mm.
how he felt. And it became very, very apparent. He was incoherent at times. I remember he fell asleep at the wheel, well, thankfully, while nobody else was in the car,
Oh,
but did
wow.
things like that. He would also black out from whatever opioids and whatever else he was taking, and would leave me voicemails telling me I'm a piece of shit. No one would ever love me. I'm going to die
Oh.
alone. And then the next day would wake up and send me a text and ask me how Akira, who's my dog, the German Shepherd that died in 2021, asked me how she was doing because he loved her. So it was like this whiplash, emotional whiplash from one day I'm a piece of shit to the next day, hey, how's it going? How's Akira? So for me, it was a lot of dealing with that. I never knew what dad I was going to get each day, which is a lot to have to, even as a college student, it's still your dad. And as I mentioned before, he was never really physically present as a kid. So it was something that I had always dealt with. And then when
Mm-hmm.
he was no longer emotionally, mentally present, it was even more of a, okay, what do I do with this? And my brothers, I have three brothers, including the one who passed, who are quite a bit younger than me. They were in middle school, elementary school at the time, so they experienced a lot more because my parents were divorced, would go stay with him. He'd fall asleep at dinner. He would just do erratic things. My older brother had a little bit of a different experience just because he was in college and didn't see it as much. And then at one point after my trauma in 2011, he also became suicidal. I would get phone calls from the Denver Health, which is a hospital here in Denver, and they'd say, hey, it's Denver Health. Your father's checked himself in for a 72-hour psych hold. So there's kind of the full spectrum of emotional trauma with that for quite a few years. I'd say the worst is always, I can never remember the time frame, and I probably say different dates on every podcast I've been on, but it was approximately 2011 to 2015-ish that I remember him being, maybe a little sooner, 2014-ish, being really the worst and causing that most emotional trauma. And for me, again, it was really the emotional trauma for me. My brothers always say that he was the most verbally abusive to me. He also had a really poor relationship with his mother because she struggled from mental health things that she never fixed and then took it out on him. So in many ways, I don't think he fully knew how to have a great relationship with a daughter since he didn't have a great one with his mother. And then just seeing that when his apartment was a mess. He couldn't keep things clean. He would not take good care of himself. That was also hard to just see in many
Mhm.
ways. And it was just sad to see as well. My dad did really well for himself when I was younger. He had a great job. He was very successful, great career. And then to just see that all crumble and him almost become homeless because of his opioid addiction was hard to just process.
Yeah. Now, you talked about all of this. When he passed, was he still addicted to opioids, or did he get, kind of move through that and get healed from that at any point?
So he passed April 4th, 2020.
Mhm.
He became clean, I want to say like 2014, 2015, 2016
Okay.
timeframe. I can never recall exactly. He actually, what is one of the very unfortunate things about, not that there's ever fortunate things about someone passing, but he was sort of on the up a couple years before he had passed. He was remarried. He had a wonderful wife who has also since passed, unfortunately. He was having, able to hold a job. Like he was rebuilding something that he had destroyed, like basically is rebuilding his whole life, which he had destroyed. And then he was diagnosed with leukemia and passed from leukemia on April 4th, 2020. So right when COVID had shut down the world, he passed in Houston, Texas, actually.
Yeah. Well, I'm very sorry for your loss on that. My grandfather died right before COVID, and I tell myself all the time, like, at least we got to have the funeral that he wanted, and that his community could rally around and everything, and like everyone could be there. And so I can't imagine losing someone whenever you can't really do anything about it. So that had to be hard as well.
Yeah, it was a weird. So I've done full podcast episodes just on his death, my brother's death, just grief in general. And his was one of the most bizarre deaths I've ever processed, or one of the most bizarre griefs, because not only was I trying to process through a global pandemic and I couldn't do anything or go anywhere, see anyone I loved, but my dad had just died.
Mhm.
And I didn't really fully know what happened to him because nobody could be with him in the hospital because of COVID. And then I was processing all of this emotional trauma that came back up when he died. So it was unlike the death of like my brother or my grandma or my grandpa, where I was just sad. I was heartbroken for the loss. I was sad that my dad had died. I also was processing through all of the nasty things he had said to me, like that emotional trauma. And then I was also grieving the father that I always wanted but never had.
Mhm.
So it was this like multi-pronged grief approach. I did more forgiveness work than I've ever done in my life, especially for anyone who I could never speak to again. Wrote tons and tons of letters. I guess COVID was kind of a good time. I couldn't do anything else. I just sat in my house and wrote letters and burned them to him and healed through it. But it was such a different grief than I've ever experienced. And yeah, not being able to even have any type of true service for him, whether funeral, celebration of life, whatever that may be. Did some Zoom stuff with his family back east, but and I spent time with my two brothers that were local, but it's not like we could actually truly do anything to honor his life. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine you could just do a whole podcast on that. I mean, we could keep diving into that. But I want to make sure to get to some of the other things that we're going to talk about tonight. So you brought up the traumatic incident in 2011. Was there anything that was particularly helpful? And you said you got Akira, your German Shepherd, right after that. Was there anything that was particularly helpful for you, near term, long term, in the wake of something that intensely traumatic?
yeah, so Akira was hugely helpful. She was a German Shepherd. I actually have a second German Shepherd that I got after Akira passed. I think I'll always have a German Shepherd now because they bring a
Yeah.
sense of safety and security. People walk very far away from me when I am out with a 75-pound German Shepherd, which is, I don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was extremely helpful because the biggest thing for me, as I mentioned, I was robbed and raped in my apartment in the middle of the night. Woke up just a man with a mask standing there with a gun to my head. And so I didn't feel safe in my home anymore. And that's where we typically feel the most safe. We feel the most relaxed. And so having Akira enabled me to feel a little bit more safe in my home. So in that short term, that was super helpful. I did immediately jump into therapy and went on prescriptions, which I needed. I don't think I could have functioned without them, and by no stretch would have done that probably any differently back then. Longer term, I think the bigger thing for me was not let so one thing I came to kind of a conclusion pretty quickly is somebody else did something to me. This man, entered my apartment and almost killed me. And he raped me. And I truly saw my life flash before my eyes. I thought I was never going to see my family or friends again. And after that moment, I was full of anger, full of sadness, just full of all these mixed emotions. But I came to a conclusion shortly after of I have a choice of either he holds the power and I don't heal, or I hold the power and I heal. And I think longer term, that was the most freeing thing for me that I ever did, especially for anyone who's experienced any type of assault or domestic violence or anything, car accident, something where somebody else did harm to you, is letting go of the fact that that person has control over your future and your process. And that truly, that long-term healing for me was the best, because in the short term, in many ways, I was really fixated on, will they catch him? Do they know who he is? Is he alive? Is he dead? Where does he live? What does he look like? The only distinguishing factor I have of him is his voice. So unless I hear him, I will never know who he is. And I really had to, for my long-term benefits and health, be at peace with not knowing any of that and not caring about any of that. And again, giving him, releasing him of that power over me of, he controls my life or he wins.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm assuming you never got any answers to any of those questions and maybe never will.
I didn't. To my knowledge, the case is still open. I haven't pursued, or maybe closed, like cold closed case.
Yeah.
I haven't pursued it further with the police because, again, I don't know what
Yeah, how could you? Right.
That peace that would give me. And in the same vein too, like, do I want to know if he's alive or dead or in jail or not? Probably not, because at this point, it's going to be 13 years in May.
Mm-hmm.
I've found my peace and, moved on in the best way that I can with what I have. And I haven't closed that chapter of my life because it's always going to be a part of my life, but I've closed him holding any power over my life.
Yeah.
So I think by reopening that, it would probably just rehash a lot of emotions. Yeah.
Right. I can't believe 2011 was 13 years ago. That
We're able to
sounds...
do math quickly. When I say I was 19 then, I'm like, oh crap, I should stop telling people how old I was.
Yeah, I mean, man, it does not feel like 2011 was that long ago, but I mean, it really was. And there's no time limit on, okay, well, I'm going to be healed by this many years later or by this many months later or whatever. There's no timeline on that, because I have been through my own shit, and even still, like, you can still get triggered even after you would consider yourself healed. You can still have something that comes up because of what you've been through. Even after you've done so much work and done so many different things to just make sure that you are as far as you can. So that's something I want to make really clear, is just healing is an ongoing process, and I don't know that, it ever really stops. Do you feel like it ever is there a stopping point to healing from something like that?
I always tell everyone healing and growing are forever. And in order to grow, you have to heal. And and it doesn't mean necessarily when I say heal that you're healing from something, like I'm speaking to a trauma, a grief. You could be healing from a phone call you had with a coworker today that made you really upset. That's something you need to heal from. Like, it doesn't matter what you are healing. We are always healing in many different ways in order to evolve, in order to grow. Those who don't heal are the ones that don't grow. So that is the correlation I always say. And yeah, I mean, I still have gotten triggered as well from my trauma. Like, again, while it was 2011, I always say it was kind of the catapult to all of the other traumas that occurred after. When my friend was killed in 2022, I don't go into details of that just for personal reasons, but the way she was found re-triggered all of my trauma. So 11 years later, I was again having nightmares and flashbacks that somebody was in my home and breaking in and doing things that I hadn't experienced since probably 2015, 2016 maybe was the last time I had like a PTSD flashback or nightmare. So here we go, 2022, whatever that is, 6-7 years later, I was completely re-triggered and re-healing from something that I thought I had healed from. So yes, absolutely, there are many, many ways in which we can be re-triggered. But what I have found is the more work you do, and the work is the hard stuff, the easier it is to bounce back when you are triggered. So it took me months, maybe weeks to process through that, get through that, move through that instead of years, because I had spent the last 12 years at that time healing right there.
Yeah. It's a great question from Tib in the chat. So Tib says, do you have any methods for building resilience and adaptability without resorting to constant significant changes? For me, pivoting too frequently, I feel like I lose self-identity and struggle to find a good balance.
You read that again because it was a long question. I want to make sure I answer it fully.
I think the main question is, is there anything that you can do to build resilience and adaptability without having to constantly be like, I'm going to change everything?
Yeah. And I don't think resilience and adaptability is about changing your whole life. And what I always talk about with clients with any type of sustainable change, it's small steps, small goals in order taking us to our larger goal. So resilience is more around how do you respond to something that you've faced. So if you respond with, this sucks, emotions, I'm feeling my emotions, I'm crying, I'm punching pillows, I'm going to a smash room and breaking stuff, whatever that looks like for you, I'm going to draw, I'm going to write poetry, and you move through a process through it, and then you grow from that. That is, to me, is resilience. It's how you respond to a situation that you're in versus somebody who says, this situation happened to me, and I'm just going to sit here and stay in it forever, and I'm not going to get through it. And I'm going to take it out on everyone and everything around me because something bad happened to me. That, to me, is not resilience. So resilience is how you choose to respond and react to a situation. But that means processing your emotions, honoring them, being okay with them, and then growing through that. So it's not, again, it's not like major changes have to happen. It's what do you want or what do you need? So for me, I noticed, I guess I always use myself as an example. Like I noticed when I started working out, my mental health, like my anxiety would decrease. So at the time I wasn't really working out much. So I added 1 day a week. And once that was manageable, I went to 2 days a week. And once that was manageable, I went to 3 days a week. Where people don't sustain lifestyle changes or any type of change in their life is when they go, I'm going to do CrossFit 7 days a week when they haven't worked out in 15 years. It's like, that's not going to work. And I can guarantee, like, yes, maybe there's the exception to that, but that's not how it's such a drastic jump from your lifestyle, how you're managing, how you're living, that you can't sustain that long term. It's like same thing when people do like crazy crash diets or they go and do something really extreme. The next day they wake up and they're like, why did I do that? Instead of, okay, here's my life how I am today. I know my goal is this. How do I take one step to get there? And then once that step has become part of how I live and what my life is, I'll take the next step. And continue to do that until they get to that place where they feel, and then they set their next goal.
Yeah. So I like that that's kind of the advice for kind of building the strength and resilience and adaptability. Now, if someone's facing grief or if they've just had several losses like you went through, what advice do you have for those who might be dealing with kind of profound loss in that way?
Yeah. Process it, which looks different for everyone. I read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of podcasts. I journaled. I went to mediums, which I still do. And I found what brought me peace. And that is the biggest thing I have found with grief when I talk with anyone is you have to find your peace in the loss because you are still here and the person who has died is not. And you have to find your way to live your life without them here anymore. And while that sounds so cruel, it's the unfortunate truth we have to face. And the sooner we find our peace with the loss and find how to move forward in our life without that person physically present, the better we are. So when my brother died, I reflected back and I said, how would Isaac want me to feel? What would Isaac want me to do? Isaac was one of the happiest people I ever met. He was one of the kindest people I ever met. Nobody had a bad thing to ever say about him. There was almost 400 people at a celebration of life, and he was 25 when he was killed. So I took that for, I'm going to be that much kinder, that much nicer, and that much happier, because that's what he would want for me. Do I still cry? Absolutely. Do I still get really, really mad that well, I guess he would have been 27 or 28 this year, that my 25-year-old brother was killed? Absolutely. But have I found my way to continue living my life? Absolutely, because that's what he would want for me. He would want me to keep living my life and keep moving forward. And I found my peace with his death. Even my family, I remember them saying to me, they're like, you processed through his death so quickly. And I was like, well, I've done this a lot now, and it's become a lot easier for me to do because I have learned that death is a part of life and it's something that we don't have a choice over. Again, giving up control. I don't have a choice over it. I have to live with this. So what am I going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been very, very helpful. I will say for me too, the mediums have been very, very helpful just because it's been a way for me to connect with those who have passed and know that they're okay. You know, I know someone who she's my age, recently lost a husband, was talking to some of her family members, and they were just asking, like, what do you do? How do you support someone? I'm like, you have to give them space to grieve first, and then when they're ready to slowly integrate different things back into their life or learn to move forward in their life, support them for that. Don't dictate that timeline. Let that be unique to them because grief is very individualized. It's just like trauma.
Yeah. I want to know more about going to see a medium because that's something that I've never done that I would absolutely love to do. It sounds just so neat. I live in an area that is not, there's nothing here. So I don't get very many opportunities to do that kind of thing. But what has your experience been there? Is that something that you're willing to share?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've talked about it before. And I'm happy to give you 2 referrals when we're done recording. I don't think I can publicly share them because I
Sure.
don't know how they feel about that, but I'm happy to give you 2 referrals that
Yeah,
do
would
phone
love
calls.
that.
So I started going to a medium in 2016 when my grandmother has passed. So my mom's mom. We were very close. I always say like she was my second best friend. My mom's my first best friend. And it was the first loss I had experienced in that span from 2016 to 2022 as an adult that I felt almost paralyzed. I was like, how did somebody I love this much just she's gone? I mean, she was in her 80s, so it's to be expected at that point in life. But it just caught the first loss we experience just catches us so off guard because we never
Mm.
think that's going to happen to us. It's the exact same thing that happened to me in 2011. I didn't think bad things happened to people I knew. I thought they happened to people on TV and nobody else. So that's how I felt when my grandma died. Even though I'd gone through that experience in 2011, I hadn't lost anyone. So I was like, this doesn't happen to, like, I'm only however old I was, 25. I was like, this is too young. This shouldn't be happening yet. So I went to a medium that my mom actually knew. And because I was so upset and so sad, my mom was like, well, I know someone who can maybe connect with Granny. And, she phrased it in like a very gentle way because I wasn't fully open to it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and loved it. I was like, this is amazing. And she said different things to me that I was like, there's no way she is making this up.
Right.
For example, I was given my grandmother's ring, one of her rings, and I had it with me in my bag. So it's not like I was wearing no jewelry. I don't really wear jewelry. There was no way she knew it. And she was connecting with my grandmother and she's like, what did you bring of hers that's round? It looks like you wear it, a bracelet, a ring. And I was like, it was like 2 minutes into the conversation, I had said nothing. I'm like, how would she know that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not wearing anything. There's no way she'd know that. And there's just other things that came up. So I will say, disclaimer, there are a lot of very bad mediums out there, and I have been to a lot of very, very, very bad mediums. There are 2 that I go to that I like and I trust and I fully believe in, and I've seen the magic of, not only for me, for my family, for my friends, for anyone I've referred who has gone to them. I feel that there's those who are truly gifted with it. It's like I mentioned before, it gave me a great sense of peace that the person I loved was still there, even if I physically could not see them.
Mm-hmm.
There's another great book called Signs for your listeners, for those who have experienced death, that talks about those little messages we get from those who have passed, which also can bring you a great sense of comfort. Megan Devine also wrote a great book. It's called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. She lost her husband, another great book on grief. There's a ton of great books on grief. So if anyone else wants others out there, I think that's another thing. Grief, trauma, all of these items. What I found, just not feeling alone is very, very helpful. And to have that outlet with a medium to know that your loved one is still there is very reassuring. So encourage it for anybody who's been wanting to do it, but just make sure you go to a medium who somebody else you know or can speak to can vouch for them, because I have found, especially in the day of social media, there are a lot just trying to make a profit, and some of them charge like $500 an hour, and it just feels so wrong. There's a lot of great ones out there, so don't turn away the opportunity to connect with a great one if you are connected with them.
Yeah. Now I want to get those books that you're talking about. So Signs was the first one. Do you know the author of that one?
My phone is downstairs. I can Google it really quick.
That's okay. I was looking. Is there anything else to the title?
It's by Laura Lynn Jackson, The Secret Language of the Universe.
Okay. All right. I just want to grab some links, just so that I can make sure that it's like, the right books that we're recommending to people and everything. All right. So here's the one for Signs for everybody. And then the next one that you said was,
It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan
okay.
Devine.
Yeah.
She also has a podcast. She's on Instagram. She's one of the ones I follow on Instagram. Her husband died very tragically. I don't know how long ago exactly, but just the way she phrases things it's very eloquent. It's very real. It's authentic. So she's another great author. And then on the trauma front, if anyone's not read the book yet, The Body Keeps the Score is a great book to read.
Oh, love that book. I'll throw a link to that one as well. I'll get a link to all of those in here. Good ones. All right, if anybody's looking for those, there's Goodreads links. I love this comment by Zach Playing Games. They said the choice we seem to have over death is the meaning we decide to make of it. And I think that is really, it's something that, some people really care about death. Some people have very, very specific beliefs. We just talked about death the other day. And so some people have really specific beliefs about death, but no matter what you believe, like, it is very personal. Also, no matter what your loved one believed before they died, like, it's very true. That comment of just, it's what we decide to make of death is very, very true. And I love that. I think that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it's all a choice, how we choose to do anything, how we choose to live with it, how we choose to process it. It's all a choice.
Yep, absolutely. So despite everything that you've been through, you found joy, you found love, you've got this fulfilled life. So how did you cultivate those positive aspects, and what role did self-discovery play in that journey for you?
Yeah, the only way any of this was possible is because I did the hard work of healing. And I didn't give up on myself. And I still, to this day, don't give up on myself. Mm-hmm. I still put in the work to feel how I feel and process through what I need to process through when things come up. And what I have found so often from the speaking I do and the events I do, the conversations I have, are so many people are like, well, I did the work, but I stopped. I just don't have time for it anymore. I can't do it. It's exhausting. And nothing that was ever worth it came easy for anyone, truly. So don't give up on yourselves, I think, is the biggest thing. Like, it's as we talked about before, healing and growth are a constant evolving process, and they're going to continue. They're going to feel different. The layers are going to look different. My healing now and grief or growing now is not what it was in 2011 or even 2022 when my brother was killed. But there's still work that I'm doing every day. And yes, some days it's 5 minutes of work where I wake up and can do a meditation for 5 minutes that day, and that's all I can do. And some days I get my full meditation in, and I go to the gym, and I ate really, really healthy, and I got all my work done, and I totally kicked ass that day. And then the next day, maybe I slept in 15 minutes late and didn't do anything. But it's that process of I'm doing what I can every single day in order to keep moving forward, in order to keep reaching my goals, in order to be the best version of myself. I didn't give up on myself because we don't have control, like I said, over anything else but ourselves. And so I knew if I wanted to be happy, if I wanted to live a fulfilled life, if I wanted to find love, if I wanted to have all of those things, I had to do the work. I had to make it happen because nobody else was going to hand it to me.
Yeah. Now, in your bio, you talked about kind of starting with traditional Western therapy and moving into the more holistic and Eastern medicine approaches. So I know that it can be challenging to kind of find that balance. And in some cases, you mentioned that prescriptions were really necessary after that incident in 2011. And I wholeheartedly agree. Sometimes that is what is called for. But how did you find a balance that worked for you after you got to a point where you were like, okay, I'm gonna see what I can do that's a little bit different? And what advice do you have for others who might be thinking about some alternative healing methods or Eastern medicine approaches?
Yeah. So in 2011, I didn't know that anything else was an option besides prescription drugs and traditional talk therapy and what came under insurance in the United States. I didn't know that anything else existed, so that's the route I went. And it was exactly what I needed because I wasn't sleeping. I had such high anxiety that I couldn't function. My PTSD and flashbacks and trauma was so bad that there was times that I would just sit there paralyzed. So it was truly necessary at the time and it was what I needed then. And I fully believe that and I don't see anything wrong ever for anyone who is ever using any type of prescription drugs if it's what they need. But because my dad was an opioid addict, I saw what prescription drugs did to somebody I loved, and that scared me. So as I slowly felt was feeling better and moving out of the darkest part of that, I continued to work with medical providers to find ways to get off of those prescription drugs until I was officially off of all of them. And then and it was about 2016 when my grandma died when I learned about the medium, but I also learned about kind of that whole other world of alternative healing, natural healing, Eastern medicine, whatever anyone wants to call it, and learned about things like acupuncture, supplementation, energy work, or Reiki, as it's sometimes called, to heal trauma within our bodies, diet, exercise. I mean, I knew about diet and exercise before I had already been practicing them, but really what food does to our body, how our body reacts to different foods, how some of us aren't meant to have certain foods, food sensitivities, all of that stuff. So it all kind of came together in 2016 once my grandma died to look even into what else is out there. And had some people in my corner who shared some information with me and showed me that. And the more I learned, the more I became curious, the more I researched, and the more I tried. So I always say, besides things, I have not tried psychedelics. I have not tried mushrooms. I almost did ketamine therapy for PTSD. I did not end up doing it. But besides kind of those drugs, which are still borderline questionable for some people, not for all, I've done probably almost every natural or holistic healing modality under the sun, from acupuncture to energy work, as I mentioned, to supplementation, to removal of foods, to all sorts of different things, just to EMDR is one that is is it Eastern or Western? It's natural, but
Right.
EMDR, I've done neurofeedback, which again, Eastern or Western, but natural modality. I truly feel like I've done as much as I can because again, that process of I had to continue to find what worked for me, and I needed different things at different times. And as things popped up, I needed something else, and then as I healed through that, I wouldn't need it any longer. So I would say for anyone who is maybe on prescription drugs and curious about that, one, if you are on prescription drugs, work with a medical provider before you go off of them. It can be extremely detrimental to your health, mental and physical health, if you just go off of drugs cold turkey. So please, 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 I'm not a doctor. I am by no means giving any medical advice. Talk with your doctor. But then there are a lot of great resources out there for support. It's one of the reasons I became a health and wellness coach. It's something I've been able to help people with. What else is out there when it comes to healing? What does that look like? Finding who is in your area nearby. What resources can you afford? I mean, I work with and talk with so many people who are in college or in their 20s or 30s or whatever age they're at. It doesn't really matter, but they're in a place in their life where they can't go spend thousands of dollars every month on just different support. So they have to pick and choose things. And I had to do the same. I still have to do the same. And finding, trying something, and if that's what doesn't work for you, then you try something different. So there's so many options out there. I think especially for people who are on prescription drugs and are ready with their doctor again to come off of that, research it, talk to professionals, listen to podcasts, see what else is out there to try, and then ensure that you're trying one thing at a time. Because if you stack on too many new things, you're not going to know what's actually working. So for me, like I started with diet and exercise. Once I was figuring out what's going there, I actually then made some changes to my diet because I had some food sensitivities. Then I made some supplement changes. Then I did blood work. You have to do it in a way in which you can truly figure out what's going on at the root cause versus just, I'm going to do all of these things and then I'll feel great, but I don't know what's actually helping me and I'm spending all of this money. So I honestly, one of the things I contribute most to my healing between the years of 2016 and probably 2021, 2022 is energy work. I, I don't know if I'd be at where I'm at today without it because my body held on to so much trauma in the organs, in every tissue in my body. And I was able to release a lot of that through energy work, through somatic therapy, through like that physical release that my body just needed.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, you mentioned that 2011 is 13 years ago, which is still insane to me. But 2011, the amount of progress that there's been in what's accessible and affordable in the US, while it's still not perfect or even ideal in many cases, it's come a long way since then.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, sorry, like massage and acupuncture, like some of that stuff's covered under insurance. Yeah. And I tell folks, I'm like, if you truly can't afford anything, see what your insurance covers first, because sometimes it covers a lot more than you think. I know some insurance that covers supplementation. So go get your blood work done with your doctor, which is 100% free, because it's routine blood work. Ask them to test for certain things, which I can help. I've helped clients like figure that out or advise them if they're like, my doctor sucks and just tests, these 3 things and won't test anything else. Because some Western medicine, I go to a naturopath, so but most naturopaths unfortunately don't take insurance. But there's still so many ways that people can find out, oh, I have a vitamin D deficiency. Well, vitamin D can actually lead to things like anxiety and depression and low energy levels, or I have a vitamin B deficiency. So, and then some insurance and prescriptions will cover supplementation if prescribed by a doctor. So there's so much more. I agree with you. We've come, yes. Well, I wish all naturopaths and all supplementation and all blood work and acupuncture and energy work and massage and all of that was 100% covered by insurance. Absolutely. There still are so many free things that people can do or very low cost because their insurance might cover it.
Mm-hmm.
In 2011, no, I think I even had to pay for like most of my psychiatrists out of pocket. I was like, what? Why am I doing this?
Yeah. The first time I went to therapy, it was like there are 2 therapists to pick from. That's what's covered under your insurance. Anywhere else is going to be considered out of network, and we won't cover anything because it's mental health care and not physical health care. So it wasn't even like you're going to pay more for out of pocket. It was just like you get to pay it all for out of pocket. So, I mean, that part has come a long way. Everyone knows my opinion on insurance. I still think it's a scam. Everyone knows that I absolutely feel like there is so much more that needs to be done for mental health care coverage and accessibility and everything. That being said, looking at where we were to where we are now, you're right, there's so much more that's available and accessible if you know how to look and how to ask. And sometimes that means working with someone to figure all of that out. So yeah, that's great. I mean, it's definitely something that if it's in your area also, like that's the other piece I mentioned earlier. I'm in a place where there's just nothing around and it's hard to say, okay, we'll go do this. Well, now I have to drive an hour to go do that. And do I have an hour to go there and an hour to come back when my kids have all their schedules and everything? So there's still roadblocks, there's still challenges in some cases, but yeah, there's a lot more available now, and it could definitely be a combo. But I'm glad to hear you say, try one thing at a time, because it is really tempting to say, well, I'm going to try. I saw this new thing on TikTok and I'm going to try it. And it's like, hold on. What new things have you already introduced and how are they impacting you? And really do that evaluation and say, all right, if I introduce this now, am I going to be able to tell what the results are? And sometimes it's like, well, you got to wait. You got to wait a little bit before you add something new.
Yeah. And I'm 100% with you. Our insurance still needs to come a very, very long way in order, or just our healthcare in this society needs to come a very, very long way. But as I said before, change takes a very long time. Think about how long change takes for each of us. So imagine how long it takes for very, very large scale things like health coverage. And so I appreciate that at least we're getting progress. And while I wish the progress was faster because I'm impatient,
Same.
It's better than it was. But one thing too, I think that came out of COVID that many may not know is a lot more is accessible virtually. So for instance, like a lot of naturopathic doctors who do a lot more of this root cause diagnostics around things like physical mental health, they can practice in any state and they'll just send you to a local lab to get your blood work done. And then you meet with them virtually. So there is a little bit more accessibility, like mediums can meet virtually. There's coaches can meet virtually. I meet with most all of my clients virtually. There is a little bit more accessibility now virtually. So for folks who may live in an area that is either rural or a place where they don't have, I live outside of Boulder, Colorado. Boulder is like one of the hubs for holistic healing. I can, Google naturopathic doctor and there's 6 pages of different options. So I recognize that I'm very fortunate in that regard. And I know not everybody is, but we do have a little bit more accessibility now, which is great.
Yeah. Now, we've kind of started talking about your coaching practice a little bit, but you really emphasize tapping into people's internal strengths. So how do you guide your clients in figuring out what are your internal strengths and how do I implement those to really foster those positive lifestyle changes? What does that process look like?
Yeah. So it depends on the client and the situation because everybody's unique. And I always take that approach. I've been a consultant for a lot of my career too. So I've worked with businesses, which is where I do a lot of like trainings and speaking engagements is more on that macro scale with organizations. But I even take that approach with organizations is not every organization is the same because people are unique.
Mm-hmm.
And with coaching in particular, that is the lens of, again, the individual or the client is the driver. They get to choose where they want to go and how they want to get there. I'm there to hold the space for them, be a support for them, be a resource as they need support on, any external resources they may ask for. And it's not my job to tell them how to get there. Now, as far as playing into their internal strengths, many people will come and say, well, I don't know how to do that because I've never done that before. And we'll talk about things like, well, you've made changes in your life in other ways, or you've achieved things in other ways, even if it's completely unrelated. What are those things? How did you do it? What steps did you take? What occurred? And just getting them thinking differently and talking through it and then leveraging, okay, well, what could you do now in your current situation that you've done in the past that would help you get to where you want to be? And getting like reframing a lot of that negative self-talk is some of the biggest thing I see happen in coaching is we are so hard on ourselves. We are all of our own worst enemies and we think so negatively of ourselves. And when you externalize that to somebody else and they process that back to you or they reframe that back to you, you're like, whoa, those words actually come out of my mouth. And when you also have somebody sitting in your corner, not only holding the space, but holding you accountable or being somebody you're accountable with towards those goals you've outlined, it moves your progress further. I have a coach. I have my own personal coach. I've worked with her for almost 4 years now. And at times I was meeting with her every week because I needed that. Now her and I meet like once every other month. Sometimes we skip 2 months because things happen and I need to change the schedule. But that's where I'm at. And now that's what I need. But I still just love the benefit of coaching. I've also found it too so impactful for folks who have been through a lot of therapy and either got sick of therapy or hated therapy all along because they sat and told a story about what happened to them and somebody sat across from them and told them, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And they felt like a crazy person because I was that person. I felt like, I remember the last therapist I went to years and years and years ago. Actually, it wasn't too long ago. It was after my dad had died. I went to another therapist and I said, I should probably just hand you a note card of all of my trauma. And she like laughed and I was kind of like, should a therapist be like, it was just one of those things where it's like, I feel like this shouldn't be funny. But in many ways, I guess it was for her. So I always just felt like therapists were so cold or so clinical. They never got real with me and kind of held me accountable for my shit and called me out on my shit. And when I got a coach, I was like, oh, whoa, this is very different because therapists are focused on the past, focused on healing. While yes, there is so much great benefit to therapists. I work with a lot of them. I refer clients to a lot of them. I am not a therapist. I don't practice therapy. We need to heal from that, and therapists can help with that. Coaching is future focused. It's future oriented. And for somebody who spent years and years and years in therapy, I at one point was like, I'm over this. I'm over talking about my past. I'm done with it. how many more times can I tell you all of the things that have gone wrong? They're not going to change. And when I found coaching, I was like, oh, I can make change because I'm focusing on what's in front of me instead of what's behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is very empowering for somebody who's been through any trauma because you can focus on something that's coming instead of having to continue to hash out what happened.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people have bad experiences with therapists, and I don't want to diminish that at all because it's very true. I had a terrible experience with my first exposure to therapy and almost didn't go back, and I didn't go back for many years. But yeah, sometimes you need to find a different therapist. I will say, like sometimes it's just not the right approach for you. And then sometimes something like coaching, I feel like a coach has more of an ability to call you on your shit sometimes, right? Because if you're talking to a therapist, they're very limited in what they are supposed to ethically say or do to help you solve problems. Like they're there to equip you to figure out how to solve problems or figure out how to process things. But do you feel like life coaching is more direct than therapy sometimes?
It is. I mean, they have their similarities, but therapy again is healing what has already occurred, not
Yeah.
setting future goals. So it's like I said, there's only so much you can unpack. How many times can I unpack the situation where my dad died? Like I've unpacked that. There's no baggage there left to unpack anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Where yes, coaching, they can hold you a little bit more accountable. They can call you on your shit, but also you're setting goals. You're talking about what are you going to do next? What does that look like? How will you feel when you get there? And it creates like a sense of inspiration internally within you because you're not. And yes, I have coaching sessions where people cry, they release some heavy stuff, they're dealing with a lot, but it creates this like internal drive and excitement and passion because it's all about who you want to become and who you want to be and how are you going to get there. Whereas therapy, you're like, crap, I have to do this homework, forgive my dad for all the crappy shit he did. And then I still feel crappy after, but then I do feel better. Like, but it's again, I'm so focused on somebody else. I found for me, therapy was very much focused on everybody else
Mm-hmm.
and how do I feel better about everybody else and everything that happened. Where coaching, it's like, okay, what do I want? How am I going to get there? What am I going to feel like? I have the power to make that happen and
Mm-hmm.
really be in that driver's seat and get there.
Yeah. So we're coming towards the end here. So if anybody has any more questions, make sure that you pop them into the chat, and we're gonna get through our last couple questions. But I just want to give everybody like a warning. If you have more questions, make sure you put them in so we can get to them. Is there anything that you do now in terms of self-care or exercises or activities to support your own mental health and well-being? You've mentioned a lot of them, I think, but is there anything in particular?
Yeah, so I should probably like say disclaimer in front of this. I do not do all of these things every single day by any stretch. I have woven them into my life and I flex them up and down depending on what I need and how I need it. The biggest one for me that doesn't change on a day-to-day basis is my nutrition, my diet. I eat a very healthy, clean diet. I saw a lot of change, not only physically, but mentally when I ate differently. Changes in anxiety, better sleep, which leads to less anxiety, those items. The other constant that has been in my life and will never go away, these are my two that I will never get rid of, is exercise. When I say exercise, that can be, it's different for everyone. Some people that's walking, some people that's swimming. For me, it's lifting weights in the gym. I've done a lot of like cardio classes and HIIT classes. It's different for everybody and nobody can define. Some people it's hiking, some people it's running, whatever that is. So those are the two for me that I've found and are scientifically proven if you do any research on it to actually help physical and mental health. So those are the biggest ones. Other ones that I still weave in and mix in. One that's pretty constant now is supplementation. I recently healed from SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It happened right after my best friend was killed, or one of my best friends was killed, which is very interesting because they say the gut is your second brain. And what's fascinating is I was processing through trauma and all of a sudden my gut was off. I'm a very, very healthy person. I don't drink. I don't do any recreational drugs. And all of a sudden I had a small intestinal gut issue. And the naturopath and some other people that I've talked to and work with very much contribute it to the trauma. So for those of you who are suffering from gut issues, it could be related to trauma. I've actually seen and spoken with a lot of people who, and even medical professionals who have had patients with trauma that have had gut issues, and many traditional Western medicine doctors don't know about it. So supplementation is still one that's pretty regular. My supplementation fluctuates. I do blood work anywhere from every 3 to every 6 months to make sure that my supplementation is supporting what my body needs. Some months I need vitamin D, some months I don't. Some months I need B12, some months I don't. And my blood work helps me guide that. Outside of that, I also do acupuncture somewhat regularly, anywhere from every month, every other month. I do energy work still occasionally. I go see a medium occasionally. And then I'll do other things like get a massage when I can, or do, if I want to read a book extra long, that it's for me what brings me joy. So for anyone, find and identify what brings you joy and build time into your schedule, whether once a week, once a month, every day for that. And as we talked about before, stacking them kind of slowly and smallly will be the easiest way to integrate.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you said I don't do all of these every day, because that would be a lot.
I can afford all of that. The only ones I do every day again are the diet, like the nutrition aspect, very clean eating, and trust me, on the weekend, my boyfriend and I once a week, every Saturday, eat. We have our treat day, we call it, where we eat what we want, and then exercise. And sometimes my exercise is a 30-minute walk or a 20-minute stretch, but I still am doing something every day to move my body.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, it is time for our magic moment, and I have this magic wand here. If you could wave this magic wand and eliminate one common opinion, misconception, or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
Be that it means something's wrong with you. Because oftentimes, I mean, as I shared before, all people are unique. We're all special, we're all individual, and we're all different. And any type of mental illness, disability doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It just means you're different and you process differently, or you have different needs. But so does somebody without those. And I wish we would stop kind of separating it out of, oh, you have this, you need it. It's like, even if I didn't have it, I would still have needs. So let's remember that.
I love that. That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Chad, if you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in, and I will just turn kind of the mic over to you and say if there's anything that we didn't talk about or go into, or I'll post your socials one more time also. But if there's anything you want to recommend or anything you're working on, feel free to just take the floor.
Okay. No, I just thank you to your audience. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation. It's been wonderful. I'm always here to be resource or support for any of your listeners. So feel free to message me on LinkedIn, message me on my website. You can email me directly. There's also links on my website to other podcasts I've done if you do want to dive more into grief or some of the other topics we came up with. Right now, I don't have any public offerings. I am working on some more speaking events and potentially some other workshops that would be public instead of just for organizations. But for any business owners or leaders out there who do want internal workshops on topics like grief and trauma to talk about in the workplace, I do those trainings and speaking events in workplaces, and they're becoming more popular. So always happy to collaborate, always happy to connect. My goal truly is to not only help individuals get through whatever they're experiencing and live the life they want, but also to create workplaces where we can all thrive regardless of what we've been through.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again just for joining us and taking the time out tonight. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on here and just sharing your authentic self.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart. I hope the conversation with Tamara Fox has given you some valuable insights into the complex journeys of trauma, grief, and healing. It's clear that taking control of your healing process, being patient with yourself, and finding what works for you are all crucial steps in building resilience and moving forward. Tamara's story reminds us that it's okay to feel what we're feeling, and that healing is an ongoing process. Whether it's through therapy, self-care practices, or reframing negative self-talk, there are many ways to navigate these challenges. The important thing is to take small, sustainable steps towards a healthier, more resilient you. As we discussed, grief and trauma are deeply personal experiences, but you don't have to go through them alone. Connecting with others, seeking support, and being kind to yourself can make a world of difference. Remember, your journey is unique, and it's okay to take it one day at a time. If you found today's episode helpful, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and review the show. Your feedback and any engagement helps me reach more people and continue bringing content to you that matters. Share this episode with someone who might benefit from the story and from this discussion. Anything you do, any buttons you click, that's what helps. Stay connected with me on social media. Also, I'm MommaFoxFire everywhere, and let me know your thoughts and experiences. Your voice is an essential part of this community, and I absolutely love hearing from you. If you're looking for ways to connect, click the link in the episode description. That'll take you to the website. It's got all the links right there for you. Thank you again for listening. Remember, even when life feels like it's falling apart, you have the strength and resilience to put the pieces back together. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you next time on Even Tacos Fall Apart.